Welcome, Dracuphiles, to Sundays with Dracula. Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will. This is chapter 17 of Sundays with Dracula. I am Edward G. Pettit of The Rosenbach in Philadelphia, the home of Bram Stoker's notes for Dracula. Over 100 pages of early plot ideas, outlines, and research notes compiled by the author over the 7 years he developed and wrote the book. It is an extraordinary record of the conception and development of a novel, and it's really way cool. We will see something of Stoker's notes today, and joining me today as co-host is author, publisher, creator of Dracula, The Evidence, Josh O'Neill. Hey, Josh.
Good to see you.
Great to have you back. Thanks for coming. And joining us today is a very special guest, a superhero special guest, the superhero we all need in our lives, a librarian whose superpower is that she knows the answers we don't even know we're looking for yet. Elizabeth Fuller has been the librarian at the Rosenbach for over 30 years, which means she has been helping researchers with Bram Stoker's notes for over 30 years. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ed. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
I am so excited to have you here, Elizabeth, today. So I always, I work with Elizabeth at the Rosenbach, everyone, and she's the go-to person if I ever want to know, like, just do we have something? And whenever you assume, like, we don't have this or we don't have anything related to that, and I always have to stop myself and go to Elizabeth and say, hey, how about this? And she's like, oh yeah, well, we have a letter here. This relates to that. And she knows the collection so well, which is vast. And it is an absolute joy working for her. She is one of the coolest geeks that I know, and I'm happy that she's on the show. Elizabeth, we're going to talk a little bit about your time over the years of the Rosenbach. And you're also going to share some new vampiric items recently acquired for our collections. Right. Awesome. And then you're going to stick around and take a deep dive into the chapter with us.
Yeah.
Because that is what we do here on Sundays with Dracula. We illuminate, elucidate, explicate Bram Stoker's novel about bloodsuckers in the 1890s, one chapter at a time for 27 weeks. Co-hosts join me each week to create a kind of conversational annotation of the entire novel. And Bram Stoker's notes are just one of the many gems of the Rosenbach's collections. You can go online. You can see some of our collections guides, as well as gallery gateways of past exhibitions and other virtual programs and courses that we are creating. There's also a support tab up there on the Rosenbach site. You can click on the support tab. Any amount helps. You can join the Dracula Club. I'll have more about that in the mid-break today. And I also wanted to thank everyone who attended the Dracula on Film program that we had on Friday night with David Scull, talking about adaptations of Dracula. It wasn't all vampire films, so even though we threw, Dreyer's Vampire in there. But it was a great talk. It was, I know a lot of you in the audience were there, so I want to thank you for coming. Thank you for being in the Dracula Club, all that kind of stuff. So during the show today, remember, if you're watching live on Zoom, you can use the chat to talk amongst yourself. But if you have a question for Elizabeth today, or for Josh, or for me, put them in the Q&A box, and we should be able to get to them. If you're watching the live stream on Facebook, we don't engage with the chat or the comments on Facebook. What you need to do is sign up. Go to the Rosenbach website and sign up, register, so you can do the live Zoom and be a part of the chat here on Zoom, because it's so exciting and fun. Elizabeth, let's talk to you for a minute. You've been at the Rosenbach for how long?
Since December 86. So that will be, it's coming up on 34 years. For the first 8 years, I was actually working on cataloging projects. So I became librarian in 94. I guess I'd started working with researchers regularly about a year before that. Okay. But that has, I'm not a content expert. My expertise is in knowing what we have and in matching people with the things they want and need and will be interested in.
Elizabeth G. in the audience asks, what made you join the Rosenbach?
Job ad. I was about to graduate from library school, and I had not studied special collections in library school. Figured I'd go into straight up cataloging in an academic library, but some of us were sitting around reading job ads to each other one day, and I said, "Oh, this one sounds really interesting, cataloging historical manuscripts." And a friend who'd done special collections said, "Oh, the Rosenbach, you have to apply." So I did some quick research, and
I found how awesome it was, and what a great, collection it is, and so varied in the holdings.
Yeah. And being a generalist at heart, it really suits me. A place the size of the Rosenbach can't support subject experts in every field, and since the Rosenbach, the place it occupies in Dracula studies is similar to that in the worlds of Lewis Carroll, Marianne Moore, Joseph Conrad, Robert Burns, and we've got
Chaucer. We have illuminated manuscripts as well, Canterbury Tales.
We've got other medieval manuscripts. The history of the antiquarian book trade is a big topic. So many other things. So I enjoy that variety and the opportunity to make connection. We'll see in a minute with one object some really interesting connections among those different areas.
Is there anything, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, is there anything that you can really say is your favorite at the library? Like an area, even an item or an area?
If I have to pick one object, I always go back to the first thing I cataloged, which is a letter from John Adams to his son, Thomas Boylston Adams, who at the time was 4 years old.
Wow. That John Adams president wrote.
Yes. That crusty old stuffy old John Adams wrote the sweetest letter to his little boy, which still shows you some of it's very John Adams, but it's also very sweet. That is part of our Founding Fathers Behind the Bookcase tour, at least in the in-person version. I'm not sure because as we do them online, we can't always include as many objects just for logistical reasons, but it's also available. Anyone who's interested can make an appointment. We reopen to see it. I think it is. If it's not available on the web, do get in touch and we can make sure you get a copy. It's a lot of fun.
Do you know there is now a vampire connection with John Adams? There is a comic book being published. Josh, you know the comic book called Philadelphia? I can't think of who writes it or illustrates it now.
I'm not sure I do.
I'm loath to go rifle through my comics on the side. It's called Philadelphia, and it's set in Philadelphia, and it's about a vampire uprising. And it turns out John Adams in his life was turned and became a vampire. He and his wife, is it Abigail, right?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Turned, and they have been kind of creating vampires over the years in order to eventually start a real revolution, because he was dissatisfied with the outcome of the American Revolution. Now he's going to start a vampire revolution. It just ran through the first arc, 6 or 7 issues, and then the pandemic kind of stopped it for a bit, as it did with all comics. And now it's going to, I think it's supposed to return either next month or October or something like that. So Philadelphia, John Adams is a vampire.
That sounds great.
Wow.
Did you look that one up right away, Josh? It's really well done.
Cool. I know the artist, Jason Sean Alexander. He's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to look this up.
And who's the writer of that? Who's the creator of that?
Barnes, who I'm not familiar with.
And was it Image? I can't remember. Who put it out?
Yeah,
it is Image. Okay, Image Comics. So, Philadelphia, good vampire comic. Wow. And set in Philadelphia. What a great name too, Philadelphia. That's just, it's just we've been asking for that, nickname for years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how that one slipped past me. I gotta give that a read.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Elizabeth, and it works like a police procedural too, because there's cops investigating, and I can't say enough good things about the story itself. It really worked well, and they create their own vampire universe in it. So, Elizabeth, When did you first read Dracula? Were you very aware of Dracula before you came to the Rosenbach?
Yeah, I mean, so you can't be unaware of Dracula. Certainly, I didn't read it until so in high school or college, I suppose. I had encountered various incarnations. I wasn't especially a horror fan. Still not especially. I like the detective aspect of it certainly appeals to me. They're I enjoy the suspense. I like a lot of vampire stuff. But yeah, I didn't hit the novel until I was in college, and didn't really spend a lot of time with it thereafter till I got to the Rosenbach. But that's
And since then, you got to, really look at the notes as one of the
oh
first.
yeah.
It was something that I actually had been to the Rosenbach and seen the notes and held them and had a presentation from Kathy Haas when she used to be
Hmm.
one of the part of the collections team there, and I had a facsimile edition. And I used to use it all the time, but being able to regularly look at them and do that kind of stuff, you started that. But you've also had lots of researchers come in over the years too, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I have I've corresponded with people who go back as far as like Clive Leatherdale and Raymond McNally. They didn't visit in my time, but I have worked in person with Dacre Stoker, of course, and people who have been guests and members of this group and hosts: David Skoll and Les Klinger, Christopher Frayling, Josh Hitchens, Lockie Heiss, more recently Anastasia Klimchinskaya, and just so many of the other big names in Dracula and vampire studies: Elizabeth Miller, Robert Etienne Bizong, Nina Auerbach, Leonard Wolf, Paul Murray, Barbara Belford, Marvin Kaye, Gene Youngson, writers like Elizabeth Kostova and Joel Emerson. Elizabeth Kostova gave the Rosenbach a little cameo in disguise at the end of The Historian.
Did you know that was going to happen in the book? Did you know?
No.
That's great. Because we're not named. The Rosenbach isn't named. It's just that that we know it's the Rosenbach.
Yeah,
right?
Well, in fact, there are acknowledgments in the beginning to I forgot, and it's some other. It's some twist on the name. It's some other name, and the complimentary copy came to us, and a lot of people opened it up and said, couldn't even get our name right. What's going on? And then you look at the date, which is set in the future, and these acknowledgments are part of the fiction.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of fun. And there are, younger scholars are doing really interesting work.
For people that might not know, this is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And it's a historical novel with Dracula, and part of this novel is the whole Vlad Tepes's Dracula over the centuries. And
yeah, it's the hunt once again for Dracula. And there are younger scholars like Anjali Raza Kolb and Travis Lau, who've been doing some really interesting things with various takes on Dracula. So I've been involved in the Rosenbach, if not if I haven't been on camera, but the Rosenbach was involved with when HBO brought out True Blood, they did a couple of mini documentaries on the history and presence of vampire fiction, and we were in that, and I had a couple of minute or two as a talking head in that, and there have been other podcasts and documentaries and so on that the Rosenbach is featured in. So I've been around a lot of Dracula folks for a long time. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. We have some new acquisitions that you're going to talk a little bit about today.
Yes.
Let me know what you want to start with, and I'll share the image.
These are just a few, I should say, of acquisitions in a variety of fields we made over the last couple of months. But
well, wait a minute. Before I always talk about how we have the notes, but we have a whole bunch of Stoker editions and things that I don't talk about that much. Why don't you let people know what we have? Our vampire hold.
This has all grown up This is all post Rosenbach Brothers acquisition. Dracula was not literature in Dr. Rosenbach's day. He liked a good detective, so he had a collection of detective novels and so forth. But there's a difference between those and literature in his terms. He did have a copy, and you can see it over Ed's shoulder, just sort of behind his little skull swizzle stick there. A modern translation with the frontispiece, sticking out of his bookshelf, that frontispiece portrait of Vlad Tepes. We have a German pamphlet from about 1488, the propaganda tales of the horrible misdeeds of the historical Dracula. He had that as an example of early printing.
There's how it looks.
Yeah. And on the strength of that, the Rosenbach ended up buying in 1970 when the notes became available and were offered to us. That was the connection that that had us purchase it. So we bought the notes, and then at the same time we bought a first edition. We were later given a copy of another copy of the first edition. Since then we have bought the more recently copy of the abridged 1901, the first paperback, with that wonderful cover illustration of Dracula crawling headfirst down the castle wall. We have two brief letters, a copy of his straight novel Miss Betty, one of his lesser known. It's just a regular society novel.
Several first editions of his novels too, right? But do we have all? I don't think we have all of them yet.
Right? No. Yeah, and so we have a group on loan right now, so of many of them, but those are not yet ours.
And beyond the Stoker, we have the couple first editions of Polidori's The Vampire too.
Yes, yeah. We have two 1819 editions, in English and American, of Polidori's Vampire. And we acquired last year, 2 years ago, a playbill, a broadside playbill, which is mostly for an 1826 performance of Presumption, or The Fate of Frankenstein. The first stage adaptation, although not the first production of that adaptation. And it also mentions, as playbills of this era always do, I mean, there are multiple things on every bill, and it talks about what else is in repertoire at the moment. And there's a version of The Vampire, on that. And
well worth mentioning Frankenstein today, because it is Mary Shelley's birthday. Happy birthday, Mary.
Yeah. So that's the Stoker holdings that we have, and we have
new? What do we get?
What is new? First up is another 1897 edition, the Colonial edition of Dracula. Ed, if you've got the picture up there, for Hutchinson's Colonial Library. This was designed to be sold in India. Although the publisher is Hutchinson, it is the same pages as the 1897, the first edition published by Constable, and they just sold a set of the pages to Hutchinson, who brought them out with their own title page to be sold in India. So
let me just share that too.
Yeah, there's the first. I think we've got the title page.
That up?
Which, so it,
Now, was it only India, or was this for Australia too? Or
this is just India. No, there were different arrangements at different times. I don't know enough about Hutchinson to know whether they always did for India. But if you go to the next page, you'll see the next image.
Here it is.
You'll see the verso of this title page.
There we go.
Will say this edition issued for circular in, oh no, it does say the British colonies, India and the British colonies, and I'm not sure which colonies they are talking about at that point. That is the verso of the title page, which Hutchinson printed. The dedication page to Hami Beg, that is a page that's identical to the pages that was printed along with the same pages as all the rest. Those are from the Constable edition. This is a common arrangement publishers would.
And Stoker would have been involved in the the negotiation for this too, or would it just be the publisher?
I don't have a lot of background on that. I'm not sure. That it may be known someplace.
All righty. Well, let's look at another really cool thing here. Tell us about this.
All right. This is called Yeager's Cabinet, Spiritual Vampirism, the History of Ethereal Softdown and Her Friends of the New Light. You can see the title page next.
I'm gonna go.
This is a really wild, over the top thing, and you can get the text online. I forget what it's at.
Which is 1853 and published in Philadelphia.
Yes, so this is the first American vampire novel. It is the first published vampire story with a female vampire. It is certainly, I think, influenced by, if it doesn't quite count as as part of the city mysteries genre. This author, Charles Wilkins Weber, was a sort of adventurer, spent a lot of time out west. He wrote Western adventure stories. He published a couple of natural history books. He was a proponent of slavery and ended up being killed on William Walker's filibustering expeditions in Nicaragua, if you know anything about that. But he had at one point been
I don't, but now I do want to know. But we're not going to. That's a rabbit hole we won't go down.
You can look that one up. Look that one up. He had at one point been associated with an amazing woman named Mary Gove Nichols, who was an early feminist and abolitionist, as involved also in various early, socialist movements, and she had a hydrotherapy set up, and she was very, very much involved in free love and spiritualism and all sorts of, a lot of progressive causes and other scientific and pseudoscientific fads that tended to often run together in the 19th century. She was much too, she eventually got to be too much for a lot of the other feminists in the movement. But Weber also ended up, I've lost the story of their whole falling out. It is written, but he took, certainly he was opposed to a lot of her views in any case. And he took his revenge by writing this really horrible story.
The stories, the novels are kind of romantic clef.
Yeah. The preface, it's again got a frame which has this is all, papers that were left in a box by somebody after his death. But it begins with a preface talking about vampire traditions from Eastern Europe and saying these things are a mix of superstition and real phenomena, which are explained by this, this then current scientific, pseudoscientific phenomenon of odic force, which is a kind of life energy that enables people like Mozart to create amazing things. Some people have this energy in abundance, and other people are negative repositories of it, and they suck energy from other people. So this ethereal soft down is a character. I mean, she is human.
What a great name that he gave her.
Yes,
too.
isn't that? Yes.
Ethereal soft down.
Yes. So she falls in with this whole group of conflates abolitionism and of course interracial marriage, socialism, quackery of all kinds, vice, corruption, and everything horrible you can think of course all come together, and Ethereal does nothing but drain the energy from men. And there's a wonderful epilogue by sort of the minutes of this shadowy world conspiracy who are deploying agents like her all over the place.
This is available online, and I'll let everybody know. I'll put the link up on the Sundays with Dracula Facebook group, so you can all read this. I actually haven't read this yet. I've been trying to get to it lately. My my reading stack is yay high. So but I'll put the link up for people to read because I'm totally fascinated by this.
It's definitely in the so bad it's good, or would be if you can set aside the author's views.
Yes, which can be difficult in 19th century texts, as I always encounter. But there's another little item before we get to our chapter today. I really want to make sure we hit this other little thing, which I didn't know about, which you're just revealing today. There is a strange vampire connection to, I'll pull it up here.
This is one of several books that we just received that belong to members of the Rush family. Dr. Benjamin Rush, his remarkable wife, Julia Stockton
name
Rush.
Up top here, Benjamin Rush.
Yes, colleague of the infamous vampire John Adams, a signer of the Declaration, etc. And we have the papers of several generations of the family. The Benjamin Rush who signed this title page. I keep pointing at the screen as if you can see it, pointing at my screen.
I have my little arrow here, Benjamin Rush. Up top.
That is his grandson, Benjamin Rush.
Oh, because I was looking at that. I was like, that's 1860.
His son, Dr. Ben's father, Richard, also signed it somewhere. But now, Memoirs of the Life and Writings of Vittorio Alfieri, published in London. It's 1820 something. It's written by Charles Lloyd, an English romantic. We have a couple of his writings. He was a dear friend and collaborator of Charles Lamb. We have a lot of, so it fits pretty well into our collection for its own sake as well as its Rush provenance. Vittorio Alfieri.
The vampire connection is with Vittorio Alfieri, right?
Yes, an Italian dramatist who worked for several years as secretary to one Gaetano Polidori.
The father of?
Dr. John's father, yes.
There you go. So that's the unusual, the Kevin Bacon down the line connection to vampires for this.
Yes.
So
I should mention my favorite other 6 degrees or 3 degrees. We have one thing in the collection that connects Bram Stoker with Lewis Carroll and the Lincoln assassination. So,
you can't just drop that without telling me what it
is. It's a playbill, and I didn't think of it until a couple days ago when it wasn't possible to get an image of it for this. As part of our extensive Lewis Carroll collection, we have a group of playbills for performances, productions that he went to that some of his child friends did also, and these belong to this family of these friends. And several of them are from the Lyceum, And one of them, although Lyceum once, of course, had Bram Stoker's name in as the business manager. And one of them also has a plug for a coming production in which several of the Booths are involved.
There you go. Elizabeth does this to me all the time. She's like, says, "Oh, and then of course this, and then like it's usually like a few sentences later, I say, whoa, go back. What did you just say?" And she gives me the story. So that's awesome. All righty. Lockie had a question do we have any first or early editions of the Swedish or Icelandic versions of Dracula?
No, we don't. Those are yes, not yet. Yeah, those are certainly things that we would love to acquire. Those really have just become known within the last few years, and we haven't yet. The acquisition fund has. We've made a lot of draws on it in the last couple of years, so we may need to build those funds up. We are very happy to accept donations. So if you want to earmark anything for building up those collections,
absolutely,
we're happy to have it. And
if
you when you know of any that become available,
let us know.
Yep.
There's also a blog post on this on the Rosenblog. If you go to our website and look up the Rosenblog, I think it's under the collections drop-down menu. Judy Gustin, our curator, wrote up a little blog post about these new acquisitions. And there's other ones too, like there's an Uncle Tom's Cabin illustrated by Crookshank, and so you can read about these as well on our website. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for all of that. Elizabeth, are you drinking something special for today?
Oh, it's tonic and lime juice with grenadine. It may have a name. I don't know.
You can give it a vampiric name. Go ahead.
Nothing has come to mind yet, but throw your ideas in the chat.
Josh, you drinking anything special today?
I'm just drinking coffee today. I need
just coffee. You usually do though, right?
I eat cake for breakfast.
Ooh, that's a very good idea.
That's good.
Excellent advice. I like mugs that have good advice on them.
Yeah.
My drink today is really tied to just this chapter, because this chapter is one of those. It's just like moving the plot along. Am I right? It's just like, yeah, and these people come in and they meet each other, and like we just need to move from this part of the book to the next part. Like the last chapter was the staking of Lucy, and the next chapter is Van Helsing really coming in and giving us all the great vampire lore. So, so this chapter is just kind of in between. It's definitely a moving the plot along. So this drink is, I had a hard time coming out with a special cocktail today, and I thought it should be a drink. It's the drink that you just enjoy while you're waiting for the action. You show up to the bar early for dinner and like, what are you going to order? You can have a white wine or something, or just something before the action starts. So it's just a gin and tonic to pass the time. It's not an exciting or special drink, but it's good. I love gin and tonics. I really enjoy them. But it's ordinary without being bland, and I'm calling it the Chapter 17. That is the name of this drink. Gin and tonics forever for me now will be called the Chapter 17, and that's what I'm drinking today. So cheers. And I could drink a lot more of these than I could usually drink of the cocktails I have on this show. So this is the Chapter 17 for everyone. Cheers. I actually have
I'm calling gin and tonics Chapter 17s just as a standard, as though everyone should know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
right. Yes.
Everybody call gin and tonics Chapter 17s from now on, and we'll get that rolling. So, because most books have a chapter like that, right? Unless it's like a serial fiction that was later, put, into a one novel format. It's a Chapter 17. You just got to get through this action to get through this plot. thing to Mina and Jonathan to meet everybody, and then you can get to back to the what's really going on.
Right.
For me, for my sort of unusual approach to Dracula and obsession with like the documents and how they're arranged and how they're dispersed and how they're organized and who reads what when, this is an action-packed chapter for me.
For you, yeah.
Yeah.
This is my ears perk up when I read all of this incredibly boring stuff about how many boxes there are, who has which invoices about which boxes, how many carbon copies are made of things. I wonder, Elizabeth, if you feel the same way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is where, you know, information processing takes over. It makes it possible to catch the vampire.
This is the archivist chapter here.
It is, and I also feel like this is sort of the chapter in which Dracula truly becomes a metafictional work, because it really becomes about different characters reading different sections of the novel. And that I wanted to pose a question. I have a feeling the answer is no, and I just don't have the historical context to be able to answer it.
Is this about the chapter?
Yeah.
All right, wait 1 sec, and then we'll get to it, because I actually have something I wanted to throw in there. I have a Revenant from last week that I needed to hit, if only because it's a correction, which I really wanted to hit. Revenants are something I haven't done in a while. It's something that's haunting me from the last time, since we've already staked the last episode, and I'm gathering my notes. But Barbara had written me an email to correct something, and I'm certain that she is correct. I had trouble figuring out the time of the visit to the graveyard in the last chapter, because there's 2 visits that they make when they finally stake Lucy for the second time. And I wound up assuming it's at night because they needed the place deserted, right? But the text says a little before 12 o'clock, we 3, Arthur, Quincy Morris, and myself, called for the professor. It was odd to notice, we all wore black. And then we got to the churchyard by 1:30 and strolled about, keeping out of official observation, so that when the gravediggers had completed their task and the sexton, under the belief that everyone had gone, had locked the gate, we had the place to ourselves. When we were alone and had heard the last of the footsteps die out on the road, we silently, as if by ordered intention, followed the professor to the tomb. I'm thinking it must be midnight, because the place needs to be deserted and they're locking up the gates. So my 12 o'clock is midnight. That's not true. It's actually noon. And I was thrown off because they locked up the gates. This has
why
to
would you be locking the gates at noon?
Because we don't know the rules of this place, whether that it's actually a cemetery that people would visit. It doesn't seem to be, because he's very confused in like whether this is a cemetery or this is a churchyard. But this place, you just can't go in anytime you want, I guess, and visit. You have to, do it. So, because especially when they come out at the end, Barbara points this out to me, that the sun is shining when they leave. Outside, the air was sweet, the sun shone, and the birds sang. It doesn't take them 8 hours or however, 6-7 hours to stake Lucy and then take care of it and leave. So it really must be in the afternoon that they do this. And of course, she has to be sleeping, right? If it's after midnight, she's already going to be up and trying to get out of the tomb because he has it sealed and she can't, or she's out of the tomb. So it can't be at night. So I was confused, and it really, I'm pretty certain now that 12 o'clock he means noon, 1 o'clock means 1 in the afternoon. What threw me was the sextons leaving and locking the gates, but I guess they only let people in when they need to. Thanks Barbara for the correction. And it doesn't change, though, that they still first encounter Lucy at night on what would have been her wedding day on the 28th, from Stoker's notes. And then they come back the next day to kill her. It is to re-kill her, as we deal with vampires. So that is my correction for this one. That's the Revenant for this week. But let's talk about chapter 17. And Josh, you have an overall question then, right? So go for it.
Yeah, it's an overall question about Dracula, which I think really comes in this chapter. Obviously there's a long history of epistolary novels and novels that are made out of documents. But is this the first novel in which the characters are constantly reading the documents that the novel is made up of? It really invites you into the perspective of the characters, because they're constantly handing them a sheaf of paper and saying, oh, well, this is a transcription of Dr. Seward's diary up to this date. There's no reason you really need that piece of information unless you want to go back and say, okay, well, what does Mina know right now? Like what?
Yeah.
And so it becomes a novel that reads itself. The characters are constantly reading the novel and constantly updating it. And you have a document in your hands of the complete list of information they have, and they have incomplete pieces of information. And the author and the characters are always updating you about what information who has. And I was just wondering if there was a precedent for that. I couldn't think of another example. In The Woman in White, there's the love letter that sort of gets passed around and read by a number of characters.
But it's very obvious that text is put together after everything has happened.
Right. Exactly. It's not sort of in real time and people reacting to the existence of the text. So that was just an interesting question to me that I couldn't think of a historical precedent for it, but I think it's likely that I just don't know. I think there's an example out there I'm just not thinking of.
Yeah, if anybody can come up with one in the chat or put it in the Q&A so I really know. I can't think of any. Well, and usually you get this immediacy with epistolary novels where they're all letters, from the 18th century or whether or not they're in the 20th or in the 19th. But there's an immediacy that like things are happening and then somebody's writing about them almost in real time. But that's different than actually all the characters are reading the letters and then commenting on them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. They're reading each other's descriptions of typing the previous documents and commenting on the descriptions of the retranscriptions.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and it's just very unusual. So to me, this is an action-packed chapter because it really is the chapter where the book starts to read itself.
I do have some notes to ask you about those moments later as we go through the chapter, because there's a couple times when then they start talking about chronology, and so I definitely want to hit you with that when we get there, because I was thinking of you for that. But that's a great meta observation of the kind of meta quality of this chapter itself, and good. We'll keep that in mind as we go through. Elizabeth, you have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, this device also, I mean, it gets Mina out of the awkward situation of knowing from Lucy what all these men were to her and being able to, when she first meets them, it's, oh, he doesn't know that I know. But then she can say, well, and there's good reason for her to have read the diary. It's well, of course, her dear friends shared some of this stuff with her. But then, as Van Helsing says, everybody's got to know what everybody knows. Then it's
an interesting plot device for getting characters who aren't in the same circle onto the same page too, right? Like you don't have to have a scene where like I explain the story to you, or even just like a cutaway and then like I explain the story. Like this is the way the characters can learn about things that they weren't present for.
And if you are now, it's not as if this appeared in serial format so that readers were going, encountering it over a long period of time. But if you're the kind of reader who doesn't always think about while you're going, it's going back and forth between these different groups of people. And everything, but you can kind of lose track of who knows what about each other, about events by this point. And because these narratives have been, proceeding very separately, every once in a while you get a little glimpse. Somebody says something that reveals that, oh, of course they don't know about all this other stuff that's been going on. But this is a place to bring it together and stop having to work on all these parallel tracks and remind the readers just what everybody has known up to this point.
Well, let's get into the chapter then. Chapter 16 last week ended with the destruction of Lucy, and then the very end is Van Helsing reminding these guys that there's more work to be done, that this is just the first battle. Now we're kind of going to war. And this chapter begins with it's Seward's diary, still, and he's Van Helsing finds a telegram waiting for him. So more tech involved and more ways of communicating. Every chapter we're reminded people are communicating in different ways, and this chapter especially will be about that. And Mina's coming by train, and Jonathan is at Whitby. Important news, Mina Harker, and so Jonathan has gone to Whitby. This is the first hint that we've had that. So, and as a reader, and we get this often in a novel, like as a reader, we understand that what that connection is. So that Jonathan's going to go to the place where we know Dracula first landed, and Jonathan hasn't been there yet. Van Helsing then brings she brings Seward up to speed. He gives him the typewritten copy from Mina, tells him to master all the facts. See, we're getting the reminders of this right as soon as the chapter starts, right? He gives him a typewritten copy, tells him to master all the facts. So as soon as this chapter starts, we get what you have, Josh, is the character sharing information that we've already read the documents, and now the documents are being shared. But then he goes into this. Van Helsing can never stay away from kind of, spiritual mode, right? You will need all of your faith. Maybe, and then he goes into this kind of full on, apocalyptic language, right? This may be the beginning of the end to you and me and many another, or it may sound the knell of the undead who walk the earth. So, there's a coming holy crusade, so they can stop the apocalypse from happening. The vampire apocalypse is about to happen. And then I love how he says, then you have to keep an open mind. And when I hear Van Helsing say open mind, I think of Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. So, because there's only one meaning for open mind for Van Helsing. It's that all this evidence points to a vampire. So you have to keep an open mind. Open mind should be, I would consider many possibilities, and maybe this is go. No. It's not. It's vampire. That's what he means by open mind.
Maybe he means open to the idea of the existence of vampires.
Yes, but that's all it is.
Which is not the given for them that it is for us.
No, and it's true in this novel, So, I talk about, Van Helsing, not seeming like a real scientist, but in this world, there really is all this evidence there that there is. So he is honestly examining evidence and coming to conclusions that it's not just kind of far-fetched thinking, and that's what he has to remind Seward of, that it's not far-fetched, the solution of this. We get a couple little details here at the end of this paragraph too, or early on, that we drove off to Liverpool Street and I took my way to Paddington. He's going off to me. A little later, they talk about going on the underground to Fenchurch Street after I had sent a wire. And it's just the constant reminders from Stoker of little detail, real place details that, make this, I think in the end for his original audience, make this novel scarier, because this is a real place that you've all been to Liverpool Street and Paddington and then also the reminders of the technology and the present modern world that they're in. They go on the underground. I mean, this isn't that old, the underground, railroad in London. It's the first underground railroad in the world, I think, right? The first subway system put together. And then also that he said, even just the little fact that they sent a wire. Their mentions of the new modern world, and we know what they're battling is a thing from the past, a thing that operates by supernatural means without technology.
A telephone call in this chapter too.
What's that? I didn't hear.
There's a telephone call in this chapter
Yes,
too.
we even get a telephone call later. So
Yeah.
it's all here. So Seward meets Mina, and you tell me. I'm thinking he underestimates Mina, right? Like, what's he? She's a sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he has no idea that, you know. Then he kind of, you know, proves it a little later by the end of his passage by saying, she does not know how precious time is or what a task we have in hand. I must be careful not to frighten her.
Yeah.
Dude, you're not going to frighten Mina.
Nope. From you. But why do they both start blushing madly when they meet?
Oh, well, she knows that he proposed to Lucy, right, and loves her.
He says that he blushes in a tacit answer to her own, but he doesn't know that she knows. So what's his?
Well, she hints that, you know, it's a kind of hint that because she knows Lucy, she perhaps knows, you know, what's going on.
So he's intuiting that she must know. Lucy must. That makes sense. So okay.
They have that little, you know.
Yeah.
She starts talking about Lucy, and then she stops and blushes. Right. That means that clearly she knows he had, you know, a love interest with Lucy.
Right.
And so then he blushes. So
yeah, and as soon as he stops for a moment to think about it, this is Lucy's best friend. Of course, she would have told him.
Yeah, I buy that.
And I love how then we get this quick switch, right? So this is Seward's point of view of their meeting, and then we get a quick like, what does Mina think? Let's look at her perspective of their, you know, kind of coming together. And and then we get a phonograph right off the bat. So I got to hit you up with this, Josh, about the whole phonograph, because I know you've had to do investigation of this. And then Anastasia actually asks in the questions here, would love to hear your thoughts on the emphasis of the phonograph, though I have plenty on my own as well that I'd love to share during Drac Chat, which she will. She'll be on one of the future episodes of Drac Chat.
Good.
But I knew it once. But Mina knows what it is. She hears him talking, and then she goes in and she's like, "Oh, I knew it once from the description to be a phonograph. I had never seen one and was much interested." And then, you know, this beats even shorthand is what she says. But again, this reminder of new technology. Characters are in a modern world fighting a relic of the past. And I like that she makes the point that I know what it is. Like, I don't even need to say it. Like she has, you know, I don't need any mansplaining to tell me what this technology is, please. I already understand it. Like she writes that in her diary.
And Seward, to his credit, accepts that.
Yes, he does a lot of acceptance.
Shows her how to do it, and he admits with some embarrassment, but he does admit to his own shortcomings in operating it. And I never thought about how I'd play it back, you know.
It's so dopey. Like, he never, that this is where he's keeping all his records, and he's like, you know, I never thought about the fact that I might have to find one of these records one day. It's just like, what?
I love that mentioning of that reality of this, but Josh, you've done the investigation on this, you know, working with this is true, I imagine, right? With the cylinder. You only know how long it is, and that's all you know. Like, to find anything on that, you wouldn't know, right?
Well, presumably what you could do is just keep a written record of timestamps and say, you know, at this point on the cylinder, I discussed this patient. At this point, I discussed this patient.
Does the cylinder have it? Is there a way to find that on the cylinder, or is it still just a matter of guessing where around the cylinder?
Yeah, I don't think there would be a way to find precise times, but you would know that it was X amount of the way through, in theory, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a complete like failing of common sense, right? I mean, it would be an imperfect science, but at least you would know, okay, the cylinders don't seem to be that long. They don't seem to contain that much audio. So you could at least say, this one I'm talking about Renfield, this one I'm talking about another patient. But he seems to just have a massive pile of cylinders.
Yeah.
With absolutely no sense of what they are.
Well, he does know the order of them because he's able to give it to her, at least know what order
they are in order. That's true, but that's not much to go on. You know, if you've been keeping this journal for months and months and months.
I also like how
it's another example of Mina, the sort of amateur archivist,
yeah.
who is the only one who seems to have some sense of how to organize information and how to archive things and how to reference things.
She thinks right away how it can be better. This beats even shorthand. She's already thinking of ways to be more efficient. Like, I understand I can do shorthand, but this will be even more efficient if I can do this and then transcribe it.
But yeah, it's a very, very interesting moment. And I mean, it's one of, honestly, the biggest compromises of our Dracula, the Evidence Project is, throughout the project, you have to make these decisions where often you're weighing readability and legibility and usability versus authenticity. And mostly, I think we found a lot of creative and clever ways to square those circles. For instance, with shorthand, I mean, you want shorthand. I mean, obviously, it's important that these documents are in shorthand, but you want the reader to be able to use them. So we came up with conceits where the things have been transcribed in different ways. But there's no way we were going to produce wax cylinders. Because I looked into it. I found a company, you can make them. They're extremely
somebody who does it.
Yeah. I mean, we considered it, but obviously no one would ever be able to play them. There'd be like one customer out there who has the machine. So what we've done is just produce records, which are historically, I mean, vinyl or records, which are relatively historically accurate. The fact that they're made of vinyl is not historically accurate.
They'd be lacquer, I think, at the start, right?
But otherwise, basically the size and the shape of the records sort of fits in with stuff that very much could have existed at that time, and that Dr. Stewart even could have been using. But he very specifically mentions the existence repeatedly of these cylinders, and there was just no way for us to pull that off. I mean, half the fun of the project is the tactility of it and the ability to use, like, to take a record and put it on a record player and listen to it. And so that was something irreplaceable. So it's just one area we had to sacrifice some of the verisimilitude from the novels. Probably the biggest area where I'm like, well, it's not accurate, but it's as close as we're going to get with something that you can actually use and enjoy.
They hit this moment here, Seward and Mina, right away, where, like, he realizes, I can't just let you listen to these, and she has to kind of prove her worth. And so in a sense, these kind of recordings wind up being almost a plot device for her to be able to prove that she can do this, and they strike a pact that and he says, may I make the only atonement in my power, which is to let her listen to the cylinders. And I find this unusual for a Victorian novel, that this man and woman, they meet for the first time, and they have connections, but this is still their first meeting, and they trust each other with personal information as if they're equals. Like Seward says right away, like, okay, I can trust you. You can do this kind of thing. And it just reminds me all along that Dracula might not be a progressive novel, but I always wind up, it seems to read that way in light of other novels from the time, like we're set up with Seward's initial impressions of how he's going to handle this woman, you know what I mean? Like, that she's going to get upset. I need to figure out a way to handle this woman. And instead he winds up trusting her. Instead of handling her, he winds up striking a pact with her and trusts her. And I find that interesting about this book. Stoker's, gender politics are very complicated. But this kind of almost progressive thinking, I think is the best way I can describe it, keeps creeping in.
She does have Van Helsing's endorsement.
Yeah.
Which counts for something with Seward. I think that was a big part of it.
That is definitely true. And we get that, other people are kind of tested by who they know in this as well. All right, we're back to Seward's diary. And then he sees her after she's, distressed or looks distressed because she's been listening to this. And I greatly fear I have distressed you. And I love Mina quickly corrects him. And I'm not distressed. Like, I'm not the wallflower here. I have just been touched by hearing by your hearing your grief. And I am fascinated by that little point in this chapter. Like, her reaction to hearing Seward's voice is, I need to type this out so no one will have to hear it again. It is part of a terrible story, a part of poor Lucy's death and all that led to it. But she thinks that, this is a wonderful machine, but it is cruelly true that that technology this modern technology is maybe too personal, too intrusive, which is an idea we still deal with today. But I wonder, like, that must have been so astounding for these people, in the late Victorian age, to suddenly hear voices come over the, out of a little speaker or some kind of weird fork thing that she applies to her ears. I was looking for, like, what is that? Why does she call it a fork? But she, that must have been astounding, don't you think, for people in this age to hear voices suddenly come in and to know that that is a real voice?
Yeah. Well, there is a very practical reason for typing it out as well, of course. In this case, when you're going back over all this evidence, you want to be able to give everybody a copy to read it and go back and compare, and you don't want to have to fool with the cylinders every time and make sure people are at the machine and they, somebody who knows how to run it is there.
Mina's smart. She knows they need to be efficient this way.
And there's also an efficiency in, damping down that emotion so people can focus on the evidence and what they need to know without revisiting all of the feeling.
Yeah, I have a question from this section, though. Is why do the diaries he gives her only take her up to the 7th of September?
Well, then he gives her more after that. So
right, it just seems odd that they point that out in that moment. Your diary only took me up until this point. Is it just here, take this for now, and then I'll give you the rest? It just seems like an odd thing to very specifically flag on an exact date and have Mina point that out in Dr. Seward's diary.
Well, I guess it was, the cylinders were labeled. He gives her the first batch and they're labeled up to that date. And then he gives her more right after that, right? So and she finishes the whole thing. I don't know. It could be a practicality thing. Like, I don't know how many cylinders it is.
Yeah, no, that's possible. It's just interesting to me that they specifically said which date it took her up to, that it was before Lucy was killed and became a vampire. It's just, I don't know. I think there's something going on there, but I can't figure out what.
Is that just part more of, as much as he trusts her, it's enough to give her all his feelings to this point. Is he still trying somewhat to spare her this horrible scene, at least until he knows
maybe he's still
more of her, or just I
thought maybe he wanted to talk with her after getting her up to that, but to sort of bring her along like Van Helsing brought him along. To say, okay, like, how do you feel about everything that you just heard? And then before I give you the stuff where, we're dismembering her corpse in the tomb.
Yeah. That he's only giving her up to a certain point, and then maybe, we'll see how she reacts, you know.
Yeah. Your best friend died in this weird and horrible way.
Yeah.
And then she became a monster who preyed on children, and we had to,
But Mina's language in responding to him about how, people shouldn't listen to this anymore, is that I almost think she sounds like Van Helsing here. Because it is part of the terrible story, a part of poor dear Lucy's death and all that led to it, because in the struggle which we have before us to rid the earth of this terrible monster, we must have all the knowledge and all the help which we can get. And then a little bit later, I can see that there are in your record many lights to this dark mystery. This sounds like Van Helsing. Like if you just convolute that prose a little bit, it would be Van Helsing talk. This is the kind of language that he uses, and that
Yeah.
mission language that maybe it's a slip on Stoker's part, but it doesn't matter because it's in the text, and now it is. Mina is immediately on the page before even Seward is on the page that like what this mission is, right?
Well, she's heard from Jonathan about this guy already. So she has more of an account of him than the others do yet, really.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's very much Van Helsing's voice, but it's sort of the opposite of Van Helsing's ideology, which is that information must be parceled out very carefully and slowly, and we must bring people along. And she's saying we all need to be on the same page. Everyone needs to know everything, and we need to engage in this mission together with everyone working as one. Where Van Helsing is always kind of,
we'll see what happens later. Yeah.
Right.
They still keep it. She says, what? We need have no secrets amongst us. Working together and with absolute trust, we can surely be stronger than if some of us were in the dark. And
right. It sounds like Van Helsing, but it's the opposite of what Van Helsing is.
That part is because they fail later. You're like, that give away what happens in the later chapters, but they fail in that. She doesn't. The men fail in that.
Right.
And she's making very clear that Seward has underestimated her when he first sees her and says, you know, she doesn't know how little time we have.
Right. Yeah, and there's something very paternalistic in Van Helsing's attitude towards Seward and a lot of the men's attitude towards both Lucy and Mina. And so she sort of represents a much more modern scientific viewpoint of like, well, let's just get all the information on the table, which is very interesting. It's just more of the sort of complicated conflicted gender politics of Stoker that like play out in conflict with each other throughout this book.
Okay, before we get to the next part, back to Mina's journal again, let's take a little break here to remind everyone that if you have not joined the Dracula Club for just $30 to receive the full benefits of Rosenbach membership, the deadline for this offer is actually on September 2, this Wednesday. And let me share this screen with you. You can join the Dracula Club. Go to our website here. I think Steve's going to put the address. It's rosenbach.org/the Dracula Club with hyphens /. You get membership for an entire year. You get exclusive member access to new programs that we're running, like Monday Drac Chat. You get 50% off programs like the one we just had, Dracula on Film with David Scal. We'll also be announcing some more programs for October. And you also get 10% off any Rosenbach reading courses. And best of all, the undying satisfaction of helping support the home of Stoker's Notes for Dracula. Everybody can tune in tomorrow night for what? Not everybody can tune in tomorrow night for 1 hour of Monday Drac Chat at 6:30 p.m. EDT. This is for members and Rosenbach members and Dracula Club members only. Each week, one of our Dracuphile audience members joins me to talk about all the fabulous ideas and topics that you all have raised in the chat from Sunday's show. Maybe a couple leftover topics for me. Tomorrow's Dracuphile joining me will be Carrie Millsap Spears. I cannot wait to have Carrie on the show. I look forward to adding even more Dracula talk to my life with Carrie tomorrow night. I hope you'll join. Remember, you can watch Monday Drac Chat. To watch it, you need to register for the Zoom link. It's not the same link as Sundays with Dracula. It is for Rosenbach and Dracula Club members only. There will be no live stream nor posting of the show online afterwards. You can only watch it live on Zoom. And here's the Dracula Club page. Also running right now, too, is my Read the Blood of Dracula course. And we just had the first session last week with and we talked about Dracula. But coming up, we have a session on vampire folklore, on Byron and Polidori, on Mysterious Stranger, on Carmilla. There are slots available in all these. I think there's about 2 slots left for vampire folklore and maybe 3 or 4 for the rest of them. So if you are part of the Dracula Club, you can join those at 10% off as well. So I want to thank the new members of the Dracula Club. That would be Anne in PA, Sophie in Illinois, which was actually a gift membership. How about that? You can buy a gift membership for the Dracula Club for someone. Rita in New Jersey, Colleen in Delaware, Irene in Alabama, and right here at home, Thomas and Patrick in Philadelphia. Thank you all to the new members of the Dracula Club. Stop my share there, and let's get back to this chapter. Mina's journal, she listens to the recordings. My notes are what must have been like for people to hear. We already did that. I love how she mentions, fortunately, I'm not of a fainting disposition. That, you know, unfortunately, all the men in this novel are because they're constantly either fainting or in danger of fainting and breaking down. And we'll get to more of that later in this chapter. But lines like that, like, I'm not a fainting disposition, I think Stoker wants to remind us that Mina is not an ordinary female character. I mean, I don't know if he's reminding, if he needs to take special care to remind his original audience or just in general, that I'm creating a character here who is not the type that you would usually see in a novel like this. And so Mina says lines like that, I'm not of a fainting disposition. So that was close to, I was close to coming out with a cocktail called the fainting disposition, but I didn't do that one. But she does.
Great name for a cocktail.
It is, but she is distressed, and of course, Sword sees that, and quickly, with a horrified exclamation, hurriedly taking a case bottle from the cupboard, gave me some brandy. Quick, the brandy! I love this Victorian doctor solution to anyone looking distressed, and I wish it still happened. And maybe Mina would be like me. Maybe she's like, if I look distressed, he'll give me a brandy. So that's precisely what I would do in this. I would be such a lush in the Victorian age. No, I am not one now. So fortunately, I am not of the lush disposition, but had I been in the Victorian age, maybe I would be. And she is upset by reading this. She's now listened to the part where Lucy has been staked that we just had in the last chapter, and it is very distressing, especially if you knew and loved her like Mina did. And she responds, "What? I didn't know what to believe in, and so got out of my difficulty by attending to something else. I took the cover off my typewriter." I love her. She is like, yeah, I'm not, all right. Thanks for the brandy, but you know what? I think I'm going to get to work. That's how we're going to deal with this. None of the other men do that in this novel. They all have to have their breakdowns, and everybody's got to coach them along and like help them. Not Mina. It's like, I'm taking the cover off the typewriter. That's the solution to all of this.
There are people who cope by doing that.
Yes. So she gets right to work. And in this matter, dates are everything. I think if we get all of our material ready and have every item put in chronological order, and then she uses a manifold, which is a way to make multiple copies. And so it took three. She's even thinking like that far ahead, like, I'm going to make multiple copies of this so we can all, benefit from organizing this information. And all I can think of too is about the chronological order of the date. Well, I thought of you, Josh, and I was like, Josh, my notes.
This is a key. This is very interesting to me because she says that they put every item in chronological order, and yet this book is not in chronological order.
Yes. So we're reminded that as readers, we still don't get that. Like, their order and our order is different, because you've done this. I did this in doing the Dracula day by day. I still got some of the days wrong in time. I got that wrong last week trying to figure out what time this is. But there's so much back and forth reading, right, to figure out actual dates.
Right. One of our biggest challenges, which we still haven't made a final decision about, but we're leaning pretty strongly in one direction, is when we produce, one of the artifacts that we're producing is Mina's transcriptions on Manifold of everything. And so do we put them in chronological order or not? Or do we produce them in the same order as the novel? And
It-
it's very hard to know what the appropriate answer to that is. But this passage makes me think we should rearrange them and put them in chronological order. But again, you run into that sort of authenticity versus usability section challenge, where you sort of want the reader to have a guide through the novel as written, so they can sort of look through that and say, okay, well, now I should take out Jonathan's journal and read this entry, and now I should listen to this section off of Dr. Seward's diary. But realistically, I think if you're looking at Mina's document, then everything would be in chronological order. So it's one of those things where you can't have it both ways. You have to pick.
Because the reader of a novel has to be controlled by an author, Stoker, or the editor of this Dracula book that we have, to reveal things in a certain way to make the book more interesting. But they're clearly not trying to do that. They just need the chronological order of everything that happened.
Yeah, I mean, they have already been running into this problem of people having already recorded something that they would really have wanted to know. And you know, I don't have examples right at hand, but you keep running into this all the time. Somebody has just read something that gives them a clue to something they should have been watching out for days ago.
Well,
but because
chapter.
It takes time for a mail to get from Transylvania, or because that's one of the things that Stoker does in the notes. I mean, he was trying to keep all this straight for himself, which is why he has these 10 or 12 calendar pages.
Yeah.
Because it's when things are written and it's when they're received.
He had the same trouble. He's putting together this plot, and then he realized I need to get a calendar book to document everything. So I keep that straight.
Nightmare he's made for himself.
And that's one of the things that gives Les Klinger so much fodder for the Sherlockian game he plays in his notes, because it's not just, you know, what Watson changed or why Watson wanted to, you know, say it this way or suppress that. It's all about the order, and there are a lot more possibilities there.
This book begs those questions.
Well, and there's, you know, that little short statement before the first page where it says that these things have been placed in some kind of order. It makes you wonder who the editor is. Is it supposed to be Stoker? I mean, is it supposed to be that Mina put them in some kind of order? It's just very, very interesting to me, because I believe the initial draft was written in chronological order, wasn't it?
No.
Well,
and we don't know. I mean, the typescript of this we don't know. The typescript is the novel, so it's the order that it's in. But even the notes, they're really hard to figure out the order. A few of them are dated, but it's hard to figure out which absolute order.
I mean, Elizabeth Miller and Robert 18 Bizong think now that the notes among them represent, I think, 10 different drafts.
They're new drafts of Dracula. They've reordered them.
But there weren't early drafts that seem like they're intended to be, like the documents are intended to be placed in chronological order.
That's what I wish we had. We don't have.
I mean, we've only got outlines, and
I'll have something to share in just a little bit about that kind of deals with that. But in the notes, you not only get, you know, Stoker himself coming up with the same issue that Mina is. Again, Stoker is Mina. He just doesn't know it. But also there are other places in the notes where it's clear in his little breakdowns of how each chapter is going on, where you can see that he's revealing something for a bigger reveal later. And it happens with the wolf, that he purposefully inverts the events that the reader finds out, so the reader knows that there's a wolf on the loose, and then we get the story of Lucy being attacked, and that comes right for his notes. So that's him purposefully not giving us a correct chronology in the story in order for dramatic effect. So when the wolf then appears, and then is caught. So Mina has another curious line here, though, and there's all kinds of things going on in this, you know, all the gender politics, but there's also some bigger things too, or some other things, not bigger things. The world seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it. You know, this first, I think the gender politics of this are terrible because it's Stoker giving Mina lines that again make her non-threatening. That like she's a kind of character, she's a female character who's going to push the boundaries and be in control and not have a feigning disposition, but the men are going to be threatened by her if she's too strong. So she has to say something like, "Oh, thank goodness for all these good men," and this has happened more than once in this.
The constant praising of men.
Yeah, but I like the bigger philosophy here that, or the other philosophy here that's going on. I say bigger, it's not bigger. It's just another philosophy that this idea that she recognizes that there's goodness in the world of evil. Like there are monsters in this world, but there are still good, at least men that she says who will fight. And this is Mina being hopeful. And every time that the men have been faced with this situation of evil, they have reacted with resignation and despair, even Van Helsing. But when Mina hears the story, her first reaction is hopeful. Not that, oh my God, we're all doomed. She, as Van Helsing was in the last chapter, like, you know, that she finds hope. And I think that's great that he has this character that does that. And I'm glad that it's the strong woman character that finds hope. Like maybe it's Stoker thinking this is stereotypical, this is what a woman would do, but hey, I'm glad it's her.
But she finds strength in that hope, and maybe that's what allows her to get right to work as opposed to breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
She's even smart enough to think that, oh, I'm going to go through the newspapers. Maybe there's more clues that you guys haven't even, you know, found, that, you know, that I'll just, you know, I'm not sleepy. I'm going to stay up and do all this work. Because Mina, you're right. These guys have made a mess of this. If they had only had you there to begin with, they wouldn't have been in nearly as much trouble. So Lucy probably would have survived if Mina had been, because of course she would have, because she would have stayed with her the whole time and not abandoned her to like, oh, I have to go look at my notes, and leave for a night. So
yeah. Like, I mean, women were at deathbeds all the time. It's not, I mean, it's not like birth where, you know, doctors suddenly decided that women who'd been doing this for millennia were too sensitive and threw them out in favor of doctors. I mean, family and loved ones were at bedsides, and, you know, if she'd been there, she would have been right there. They might have tried to kick her out knowing how horrible it was going to be, but
and she's not of a feigning disposition, so she wouldn't have fainted when Dracula shows up.
Yeah.
Well, she also would have insisted on sharing information among all these people. So it wouldn't have been this sort of tangled web of who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
So, all righty. Back to Seward's diary now. And Harker, Jonathan arrives. And Seward has some, you know, is his initial impressions that he's uncommonly clever, if one can judge from his face, and full of energy. Talks about how, you know, he has a great nerve. He went down to the vault for the second time, and when he was trying to, you know, defeat Dracula. And then he sees him and he's surprised that, you know, he was hoping to meet a good specimen of manhood, like somebody looks like Quincy probably, but hardly the quiet, businesslike gentleman who came here today. But it's also, I feel like this is where we start getting the reclamation of Jonathan, that he has been a hero who has not been heroic. But when you think about it, what he went through in the castle and the strength, I mean, to climb down the castle wall a couple times, then to escape, and like he really was far stronger than I think the initial impression that readers usually have, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I certainly.
So we get this reclamation going on here, and then he comes right in, and he and Mina are putting this together, knitting together in chronological order every scrap of evidence they have, and this is where, because they start doing this, Seward, ding, 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 realizes that Renfield is connected. Strange that it never struck me that the very Next house might be the Count's hiding place. Goodness knows we have had enough clues from the conduct of the patient Renfield. Now, there's no reason why Seward would ever have connected this to begin with, but now that he has, and he realizes that Renfield has hitherto been a sort of index to the coming and going of the Count. But this whole idea of putting things in chronological order and thinking about how this plot works is something that I want to take a look at the notes now, because it's one thing to think about the chronological order and the trouble that Stoker had, and then the trouble that we have if we go in like Josh and try to figure out this order of how everything's happening. But it's amplified with Stoker because he has, especially as we can see the evidence of the notes, this constantly changing plot of how I'm going to work this novel out. And so then that also really complicates his chronology. And the first thing I want to show here, I've showed this before just recently about this dinner party, because this is an early plot idea. And this comes into play, I'll show, in how he's changing plot structure over time. But this is the dinner party. This is the end of his kind of vampire notes. And he writes this little memo for this one scene that he has in mind that he keeps mentioning in his notes, and he finally winds up dropping it. And that the dinner party at the Mad Doctor's, 13, each has a number. Each of the guests gets a number, and then each has to tell something strange. The order of the numbers make the story complete. At the end, the Count comes in. So this is his dinner party he wants to have, and he keeps mentioning dinner party throughout the notes. There's also another tidbit here: the divisional surgeon being sick, the doctor is asked to see man in coffin, restores him to life. I don't know, it's because I've looked at these notes so much that they're almost memorized, but I almost always have to, even when I know a note so well, I still have to look at a transcription, and I just actually read that off there. So maybe I'm getting the hang of Stoker's handwriting finally. But yeah, I know Elizabeth is tough, right? His handwriting is crazy.
Oh yeah. Even the experts don't claim to be able to read every bit of it. There are still little bits in the transcriptions which are marked illegible.
Yeah, but so he has this idea for a dinner party that he wants to do, and then he has this really cool initial breakdown of all the chapters in his novel that he does. And it's dated up top here. It's dated 3/14/90, and 1890 on March 14th. But that seems pencil, and so later on he realized I should date this. Is what it looks like to me. That I've written all this out, and at some point he seemed to want to know that I should know when the date of this actually that I came up with this. So maybe his own keeping things organized. Does that seem reasonable to you, Elizabeth? That he's trying to find a way of...
Yeah, it certainly looks like it was done after the fact, but also, as you can see, this is something that he worked on over time. He wrote it out once, and then he keeps going back and changing, and sometimes it's in different hands. It's got this whole right under book one. He's changed Styria to Transylvania. He goes back and changes names. He adds people and marks them out, and then he crosses through the whole page when he's
we've looked at this before
with it for the time being.
He comes up with this structure of 4 parts to this book. Book 1 is Transylvania to London. Book 2 is Tragedy. Book 3 is Discovery. Book 4 is Punishment. And then he's broken it down into 7 chapters per. So that's 28 chapters, right? Am I right? 7 4s. So math isn't the strong suit. So 28 chapters, and broken it down very, evenly, 7 per. And then in the tragedy part here, he has this Dracula. First he has, where is it? This is Tragedy. And he has this, it's first the auctioneer, the doctor, the lawyer, a night of terror. The night of terror was Lucy attacked, the medical impasse, tragedy, the vow. So he's got these kind of ideas of like what it's about. And then he's changed them and written different things. He's crossed them out and written different things that are going to happen in this. So he's come out and revised it later. But this one, he's got about the Texan here, Quincy, but also Dracula visits the asylum. And that's something that seems to come up over and over in the notes early on, that Dracula is a kind of player in the characters in London. Like, he doesn't disappear and he's only appearing to prey upon people, that he's actually, they've encountered him, that he comes to the asylum. He comes to the dinner at the end, after the dinner, then he comes in and the divisional surgeon's not there and he brings someone to life or something. But they've all encountered him. And then here we have, a little later in the discovery, we have the dinner, and then he's crossed it out. So it's, it's right here. Inquiries, the dinner. So here's where the dinner is happening now. And, but now it's just vampires. Like, it's only a dinner for them to get together and talk about vampires.
That would have been initially, before he crossed it out, that would have been this chapter, I think.
Yeah, well, or next chapter, actually, when Van Helsing then gets them all together and starts telling them all this vampire lore. But here we have Mina connects Dracula to, Mina connects Dracula. So Mina, or suspects Dracula, I'm sorry. And then the Texan goes to Transylvania. And there's this whole thing where, and this happens several times in the notes, where he had this idea that the Texan, Quincy, was actually going to go to Transylvania and investigate. And that would have been part of them figuring out who Dracula is. But then just after that, he has conviction right here. Harker sees the Count. So Harker winds up, because Dracula is part of this circle, he lives next door to the asylum, he's visiting it. Some of the movies play this up. This is how the Dracula 79 with Frank Langella opens up. Dracula is their neighbor, and he comes to the dinner party at the beginning of the movie and meets everyone. And this is how Dracula gets to know his victims. So it's not just, wait, how did he know Lucy to come to her and, prey upon her? That kind of movie kind of takes care of it. The same thing with the old Lugosi movie, the Todd Browning 31 movie. Dracula winds up moving in next door. That's why he preys upon those people. So it's not just coincidence that he preys upon somebody who was best friends with Harker's wife. And then down here we have the, here's where he was going to then put Dinner of 13 in the punishment chapter. So, and then a vigilante committee. So the Dinner of 13 maybe would have finally revealed in some way that this is, Harker had seen Dracula, the Count, and knows that it's the same person. Then he would, hey, you're the guy I was just in Transylvania with. Maybe the Dracula runs away, So this is this kind of long development of him coming up with how I'm going to do this, this plot. And then we get some changes. We get, but it's a 4-part novel. This is the structure. And then we get a few lists of chapters with just phrases, and he seems to be whittling them down. I'm not going to share all those, but, he crosses some out and he condenses some. And here the Dinner of 13 is crossed out. And then we get a more concise 3-part book with 27 chapters. And that is here, books 3, chapters 27, 9 chapters. And again, it's a lot of the same things, but he's condensed them and combined some different things here. And in this one also, but we still have Dracula visiting the asylum in this. And I'll see if I can find that. Here, it's right here. Chapter 3 in book 2, Dracula visits asylum. So he still has Dracula being a player, that there's a social component to this where Dracula is part of their social circle that you wind up seeing in movies, but that's not really in this novel. And then, but it's still the Harker is recognizes him. And the Texan still goes to, Harker's diary, Mina on the track,
Yeah, I like Mina on the track.
Yes, I love that. That Mina is the one who, it's right here, Mina on the track. Mina reads Harker's diary now and starts to figure out what's going on. And then the Texan's diary, because he goes to Transylvania. Then they search his house, the blood room. God, I want to see the blood room. And then here the Texan returns. Harker recognizes him, but we're missing the dinner. The dinner is now gone. He has finally decided that whole thing, that dinner party isn't going to work. And there's no, I'm looking through the thing here. No, now it's just Professor Vampires. It's not a dinner, and that dinner thing has changed. So this is all to kind of, let people know too, that not only is the chronology complicated because he goes back and forth and then he has to figure that out himself, but the plot itself is changing over the time. That he begins with this movement in the plot, that Drac is present with other characters in London, visiting the asylum, present at dinners. Dracula even interacts with Renfield, and he says, I can cure this guy. I can show you that he's, sane, and he does something. But Quincy goes to Transylvania for clues. Jonathan recognizes him. I love how they always have a vigilante committee. One of them even said necktie. What is it, Elizabeth? Necktie
party.
Necktie party, which
it's
is
a lynching.
A lynching. That's what they all formed to go, and you have to know that Quincy would have said that. Like Quincy would have said, like, oh, let's have a necktie party and let's go get Dracula, and all that stuff is dropped. Boy, it would have been great if some of those, because I can't believe that these are just notes that he's making and then revising ideas, and that's all it is. That there had to have been some manuscript drafts of this novel that don't exist, and why did you throw it away?
No, it's heartbreaking. I want to read that dinner party scene so badly.
So, and the blood red room, there's a room in that house that's colored like blood. I mean, where is that? Please bring it back. So that's what we have other novelists now to go and do this kind of stuff.
This is very much a side point, but I think it's interesting he has this sort of numerological fixation. That first he has it broken down into 4 books of 7 chapters, and then he's got it broken down into 3 books of 9 chapters. Everything is always the same length. And there's something, I've read this novel God knows how many times, but there's something I never noticed until reading it this way, week by week, as we go along with this program, which is that the chapters are almost all the same length. Like, there are no very short or very long chapters.
Actually, last chapter was pretty short. Last chapter was at least 1,000 words shorter than the others, and I think that was also because it packs a bigger punch. So, it's
right. Maybe I didn't notice just because there's so much going on in it. But they seem pretty consistent, and you're right. That I'm looking at it, it's much shorter.
They are. This one's about 5,500 words, and so and the others.
Likes parceling things out in very consistent ways. Mostly, it seems like.
I mean, just the fact that he's making calculations isn't surprising, because you've got to keep track for the publication of how much is involved, but the symmetry is interesting, and that's a different sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that comes at all? I've read people talking about settling on the three books as more of a theatrical 3-act structure.
First he had 4, and I've heard that was a more of a theatrical structure. So
but whether there's anything in wanting to keep parts more or less the same size.
I don't know, because it's unusual. Often, and when you structure acts for a play on stage, some are shorter than others, and often the final act is even shorter. So, so I don't know if that would hold true there. Let's go back to this chapter so we can finish it up, because now we get Jonathan's journal again. Well, we had it last chapter too, but or 2 chapters ago. But Jonathan's writing again, and he's telling us what he did in Whitby. And now here we get Jonathan's like, you know, Sam Spade. He's like, you know, Philip Marlowe on the track here. But this is again one of those things where the chronology has changed. We're backtracking. We're going back now to see what Jonathan was doing in Whitby while they were going through while Mina and Seward were meeting and going through these notes. We're in a sense, just as we're having characters talk about putting everything in chronological order, again, we get a reminder here that, yeah, but you're the readers of this novel, so this isn't going to be chronological order for you. This is just what pleases the author to present the story. And Jonathan realizes how organized the Count was. You know, everything had been carefully thought out and done systematically and with precision. I mean, he did this earlier when he was in the castle with him. He was afraid. He was still admiring the Count's abilities to organize all this stuff and be so efficient. Like from the start, this was a plan to that, you know, to use an Americanism. He had taken no chances. And Jonathan goes and starts investigating the people that took the boxes, and he talks about I have a copy of a letter to Carter Patterson and their reply and we read these copies of these letters that are almost like a receipt, especially the second one is just like a receipt. We've actually read those already and back in chapter 8 they were in. I love how Jonathan investigates here, and he goes about it by kind of making connections with people who can then aid him further, but also, I mentioned, like Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, because he really does seem to go about this like a PI, in like a later, PI novel. Like he works the case and he gets his info from others by, in a sense, relating to them or helping. Like he keeps buying these guys drinks, and when like Marlowe or Spade will work it, like crooks need to be strong-armed, and that's how you get information. Or if it's a civilian and they're like a good guy or a good girl, like you kind of use a like, help a guy out kind of approach. Like, hey, I'm looking for this info, can you help me out? And that's what Jonathan seems to does. That I think there's a class thing going on here in the way he approaches people. Like these Carter, like, yeah, okay, I understand. Oh, sure, I'll buy you drinks. Because they all want to drink, and then we get the constant joke about everybody's dusty and thirsty, and Jonathan has to alleviate that. But Jonathan takes the same kind of approach, takes the kind of approach that leads the working men to then give him details. And these one guys just talk about how the house was in this dialect, which is as a class identifier, but it's also for comic effect. That here house, governor, is the rummiest I ever was in, blimey, but it ain't been touched since 100 years. And they're talking about the dust in there. And it's because Jonathan approaches them as, a guy just looking for information, and then I'll buy you a drink, that's fine. Like if Lord Godalming, if Arthur had approached these guys, they wouldn't have told him anything, right? Like it would have just been like, oh, he's a lord and we're not going to talk to the Lord, and Arthur also wouldn't have bought him a drink, I'm sure. But Jonathan does that. And because of that, he gets more information. But it's also a reminder of his class, that he's almost closer to these guys, in a sense, these laborers, than, or carting the stuff around, in a sense, than he is to like Arthur and Dracula. He can relate to these guys, or I guess what it says is he can do both, because Jonathan, is this middle-class solicitor. He can survive in all of these worlds. So
right, he's like halfway in between almost.
Yeah, and it makes him, indispensable for this crew. And then as we hit the last journal entry here for this chapter, Mina's journal, and more the reclamation of Jonathan, never so resolute, he was never so strong, never so full of volcanic energy. He improves under strain that would kill a weaker nature. He came back full of life and hope and determination. And we've seen him in action now, in just gathering information. Very capable, knows how to get information from people, and and his wife loves him all the more for it. So, which is good. But here's a curious thing, right? This is the end of that first paragraph of Mina's journal on September 30th. I suppose one ought to pity anything so hunted as is the Count. That is just it. This thing is not human, not even beast. To read Dr. Seward's account of poor Lucy's death and what followed is enough to dry up the springs of pity in one's heart. Mina's not saying, I pity Dracula here. She's saying, I can't even pity him, which is, something that we'll encounter later, that Mina is the one of this group that can show pity. But at this moment, when she's just heard the account of him preying upon Lucy, she even Mina, in a sense, I think it's the way we're supposed to read it, can't pity Dracula, even though she calls him the hunted, that he's not even human, not even a beast. But I still can't come up with pity for him yet.
It's a strange description, though, to describe him as hunted. She means hunted by them, right?
Yeah.
It's odd to feel that you should pity something which is hunted by you because it is psychotically murdering you and all your friends. It's not. It's the hunter. Their hunting is just self-defense. So it's a very odd and interesting line to me. I mean, I almost wondered if she was almost starting to fall under the sway of Dracula a little bit in this moment, because looking at Dracula as in any way being a victim when he's already murdered her closest friend and is only hunted in the sense that they're trying to figure out how to get at him. They haven't even done anything to Dracula yet.
And they're the hunters now. They're going to become the hunter. They are becoming the hunters.
Right. But that transformation has only just begun. So it's not like Dracula is desperately trying to escape from them. So it's just a strange thought to me. It's not like Dracula is now cornered and surrounded on all sides by them, and she's feeling pity because he's so helpless at this point. He's still the one with all the power. Their only power is now they have typewritten transcriptions of their own journals. It's not like they've got him now. So it's a very odd and interesting line to me. I think there's a lot going on there.
Well, it starts to set in motion Mina's reaction to Dracula and this whole hunt to begin with, and then we'll see there's a change later in her, that she's the one that has to remind these hunters that whoa, wait a minute, people, you should have pity for a creature like this.
Right.
But she begins recognizing or maybe kind of objectifying, the prey, Dracula the prey, as being, he's not even a beast. So she's making him into something that the monster that justifies their hunting him. And he's killed Lucy and preyed upon and made Lucy a vampire. And so she is justified, but you also have to be careful.
She's sort of saying the opposite. I mean, she's sort of saying both things simultaneously, because she's saying one ought to feel pity.
She's having trouble with it and admits it. Yeah.
Right.
Seward didn't, right?
There's a lot going on. It's very loaded.
Seward didn't. He's like right away. Not only does he hate Dracula or whoever made Lucy that, but I even hate Lucy. Like, I am like, with savage delight, I'm going to stamp her out.
Yeah.
These men have a much different reaction to this situation. So they, a little later, we now see, this chapter is all the characters have to meet each other. So now Arthur has to meet Mina, and I love and Quincy, and I love Mina's line here that poor fellows, neither of them is aware that I know all about the proposals they made to Lucy. Like, this little reminder that I know more than they think I know, and in a sense, like, she has a kind of power over them because she knows things that they don't imagine that she knows. She even, I like how she writes about Lucy's death, her real death. To really differentiate here that because you kind of have to in an undead novel. Like, they didn't kill Lucy. they did kill Lucy, but it was only to free her, so it's a real death, not the fake death that she had when she became undead. But Arthur, unlike Mina, is of a, not necessarily a fainting disposition, but he certainly goes hysterical and breaks down. And he covered his face with his hands and tears in his voice. And he breaks down thinking about Lucy, and Mina needs to care for him. And then we got these really, tough lines here, these gender politics, like lines about gender politics that Stoker makes sure he gives to Mina, I think, to alleviate our, concern for her being a new woman. That she says something in a woman's nature that makes a man free to break down before her and express his feelings on the tender or emotional side without feeling it derogatory to his manhood. Because we all know his manhood is what's really important here. For when Lord Godalming found himself alone with me, he sat down on the sofa and gave way utterly and openly. Or he's just weak, Mina. He's not. It's serious grief, and he is going through this process. But the novel really plays with the way men and women relate to grief and how they express themselves. And men can be honest with women because they can break down in front of them. And Arthur's so histrionic here in his breakdown, and Mina must be the strong one. So it's this weird position where she becomes the strong character, the woman, but it's also a reminder of the gender politic that women have a certain role to play in men's lives to take care of their manhood. So that's why I keep when I keep saying the complicated gender politics, because it kind of goes both ways, and then it winds up going nowhere because all you're doing is creating gender roles that people have to stick to. So good on you, Bram. Not good. Like, no, I reconsider. Not good on you. Like I wind up going through that process constantly through here. And really we're just, finishing this up. Arthur he's needed a woman to speak to. She has this weird line here, right? It was all so strange, she says. I stroked his hair as though he were my own child. We get this, the woman is the mother figure. And then she says, I never thought at the time how strange it all was. What is that line? What is she saying? They're like, this is weird, working with these guys, like having to take care of their manhood. Because then again, that pulls her out of the thing, and again, now she's recognizing that this is a situation that she shouldn't be in, or does she mean everything that's happened, like Lucy being killed and all? I don't know.
Yeah, she's got three. I don't know. Has Quincy been in yet? She's
about to come in.
Yeah, it's strange, and she's got two different men breaking down over this.
Yeah,
which is one odd thing.
But this, this very binary world. Men and women have specific roles.
Mm-hmm.
And and Stoker doesn't want to overturn those. He doesn't want any kind of gender revolution going on. But it's complicated. And then we get all the fealty swearing again, which seems to keep happening. Right? This is like a really important thing for Stoker, or at least he thinks characters in an adventure novel must do a lot of very solemn vows. You, sir, I shall hold as my boon companion, kind of thing. Like Arthur saying to her, you, you, madam, will always have my undying love and gratitude to the end of all days. I swear on all is holy, blah, blah, blah. Like they have to keep going through, like all the characters meet and have to swear their undying devotion to each other.
One of the projected chapters is actually called The Vow.
The Vow, yes. And that's, we kind of get, we get like mini vows made. And then like mini vows keep happening, and then finally when Mina, and then they literally have, like, they all kneel down to Mina, and after she's, you know, been attacked by Dracula, and they, sorry, spoiler there, and then they have to go, you know, take a vow for her. But then we get, like, Quincy comes in, and I feel like we have to go through the whole thing again. Like, he doesn't break down, but he's like talking about, like, no woman but a man, no one but a woman can help a man when he is in trouble of heart, and he had no one to come. Then he's got to swear his fealty to Mina, you know, to finish the chapter. Little girl, you will never regret that true-hearted kindness as long as ever you live. You know, it's always as ever you live, like till the end of time.
These are always eternal, lifelong vows.
Yeah.
Like, you just met her. So that'll this whole chapter, though, I recognize all the story part, the putting things in chronological order, how that is. There's a lot of interesting meta things going on, and a lot of things that, like, this is the Archivist chapter here, where the characters meet and talk about how we have to put it all together. But in a sense, this is a chapter that really is set up to move the plot along. We have to get these characters in the mix with these other characters, because Stoker has been running 3 storylines here. There's the Jonathan and Mina storyline, there's the Lucy storyline, and there's the Seward and Renfield storyline, which is actually different from these others. So
yeah,
and Stoker and Dracula has had a hand in all 3 of these storylines, but the characters have not yet made the connections between them all.
Right.
So the characters from all the plots have to finally come together. I don't know if Josh has had to drop out entirely. I don't know. I think the feed's still there. All the characters from the plots have to finally come together. But we're missing Van Helsing in this chapter. So it's not really till next week that everybody is finally together in the same house, which is the lunatic asylum, and all the plots kind of really come together. So this chapter isn't even one that kind of brings all the things together. It's like, this is the preliminary bringing the things together, and everything will come together in the next chapter when Van Helsing comes and, you know, is the leader of the Mystery Incorporated here, right? So
yeah. Once this chapter happens, all the rest will.
Yeah.
Right. The transition to a whole new phase of this story, and then how it works.
So hence the drink, chapter 17. This is just a drink that gets me through to next week's spectacular cocktail for when Van Helsing unleashes all of this great vampire lore on us.
Yeah, I saw some good drink names going through the chat that I'll have to look at more carefully later.
I'll send you the chat for those 2.
Okay, yeah.
So somebody saying, I bet Ed has a cocktail tomorrow night. So no.
Mm-hmm.
The Monday Drac Chat, I just kind of drink whatever, like whiskey or, you know, something, or a martini, or very basic. There's specialty cocktails for Monday Drac Chat. I save specialty cocktails for Sundays with Dracula. So
Love it.
Any last notes, guys, on this chapter?
I think we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's,
an easy chapter.
I love this chapter. I feel like, coincidentally, the weeks that I've been here have been a lot of weeks where there's a lot of focus on the individual documents. So I feel like I've really gotten lucky getting to talk about stuff that's very interesting to me, and maybe more interesting to me than it might be to some of the other guests.
Yeah, it's why I picked this one.
Good.
Right.
Good. Yeah, it's the chapter where, like, they get together and let's put the information together so other people can use it, which is what you do for a living, isn't it?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in today, Dracuphiles. We will post this recording on our website. Maybe that's how you're watching it now. You're watching a recording of it. We have a Sundays with Dracula Facebook group where we can continue the conversation. Look us up on Facebook and join in that conversation. I am always available to answer questions via email. Next week's co-host joining me will be musician and Dracula collector Tucker Christine, who's also going to tell me about this time when he went to see the the reproduction of the play that Balderston adapted of Frankenstein. He adapted the Peggy Webling play of Frankenstein. Balderston, who also adapted Hamilton Dean's Dracula play for America, also did it with Frankenstein. It wasn't a hit, didn't last long, but there was like 10 or 15 years ago, they did a restaging of it, and he saw it. He's going to tell me that story next week. Don't forget to join me tomorrow night for Monday Drac Chat with Dracuphile Carrie Millsap Spears. I can't wait to have Carrie on the show. Remember to register for that show ahead of time. And it's members and Dracula Club people only. You can watch it on Zoom as it airs at 6:30 p.m. EDT. There will be no posts after the airing. If you are looking for more virtual engagement, head on over to the Rosenbach website, check out the virtual offerings we have. Sign up for those meetings that I have for the Read the Blood of Dracula course. There's only a few slots left. If you become a member of the Dracula Club, and remember the deadline is this Wednesday, September 2nd for that special offer. You can still be in the Dracula Club after that, but you won't get to do it for only $30. If you do that, I would be more grateful than a thirsty laborer when Jonathan Harker walks into the room looking for information. Josh, thanks so much for being here today.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good. Now you got to read Philadelphia. So get
Yeah,
that.
I'm on
Very
it.
good.
I'm on it. I'm looking it up now.
Elizabeth, thank you for finally being on the show.
You're welcome. It's so much fun, and I'll be back in the chat next week.
Yeah, you've been in the chat recently, and people got to know you there, and always posting great things in the chat. So I really appreciate you as the librarian of the Rosenbach. I have you know this. I have always loved the work that you do, and I'm so happy that you are the person there doing it.
Yeah, part of what I'm there to do is feed you things that you can make great programs out of. So yeah.
Mina Harker of the Rosenbach.
Yes, she is. Elizabeth is our Mina.
Yeah.
All righty. I want to get you a Mina shirt, Elizabeth.
I'm not sure how far I want to follow all that out, but it's meant as a compliment, which I can take. So
good. All right, everyone. Join us next week on Sundays with Dracula for Chapter 18. When Renfield continues his dietary plan, we learn about Mina's man brain. Quincy starts firing shots through windows, as a Texan would, and Van Helsing finally gets to deliver his big vampire lore lecture. So once again, will be played out by Tucker Christine's pleated gazelle song, Storm into Whitby. Farewell, everyone. And in the words of our friend Dracula, go safely and leave something of the happiness you bring. Farewell, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.